Today let's begin with the poem Childhood, which is in your second term, CBSE class 11. And this poem is in your Hornbill book. Now this poem, Childhood, is written by Marcus Nathan. In this poem, what happens, you see, the poet thinks over his lost childhood. He wonders about the moment where he has lost, when he has lost the child innocence and realized that the world is not what it seemed it to be as it was when he was a child. He recalls when his thoughts changed and he realized the hypocrisy. What is the meaning of hypocrisy? That is when a person pretends. So he realized pretends what is he's not doing. He pretends to do what he is not doing. So the meaning of the word is a situation in which someone pretends to believe something that do not really believe, or that is the opposite of what they do or say at another time. So that when he realized the hypocrisy of adults around him, he's just wondering that was it at this time that he lost the childhood. He finally settled down to the idea that his childhood went to some forgotten place and it is hidden in the face of an innocent infant. Don't you realize, students, that we all lost our innocent childhood, but we find that innocence of a child in every infant's face. What is the meaning of infant? That is a baby's face. So let's begin with the poem. Students, this is on page 58 of your Hornbill book. So the poem starts, when did my childhood go? Was it that day I realized I ceased to be 11? Was it the time I realized that hell and heaven could not be found in geography and therefore could not be? Was that the day? So the poem, as it begins with this question, that poet asks that when did his childhood go? Was it the day when he stopped to be 11 years, when he was no more 11 years old? Or was it the time when he realized that there are no places like hell and heaven? That is, he understands the difference between reality and fantasy. And he could understand that he could not locate these two places, hell and heaven, in any geography book. And therefore he thinks that was that the day when he was no more 11 years old. He could realize that there are no places like hell and heaven in geography book. Was that the day when he lost his childhood? So here is the explanation of the first stanza. Students, if you do not understand in any place, please write in the comment box. I will surely further explain it. So here you see the explanation is as I have given. You can note it down that the poet wishes to know when he lost his childhood. In the very first stanza, he says so. He tries to find out the answer of his own question. He feels it was perhaps the day when he realized that heaven and hell did not exist in the geography books. That is, he grows up, he comes out of his childhood innocence, and he realized that there are no places of like heaven and hell in geography books, as you have the locations of your city, Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, Florida, any place in the world is found in the geography book. Nor could provide him any information about the existence of such place like hell and heaven. Now this was the time when the author actually could make a distinction, a difference between reality, what is reality, and what is fantasy. What is fantasy? Fantasy is a a land of wonders, a land where there is an imaginary places. So the poet comes to the realization that they are imaginary places that have no existence in the world. The poet feels that he probably lost his childhood when he had acquired a rational thinking, when he had acquired a very logical thinking towards his surroundings. And also he, in the very this very stanza, he also understands that was it the day when he was no more 11 years old, he ceased to be 11, that he crossed that age of 11 years, and was it that day, was it that day when he actually lose his childhood? Now the second stanza, you see, again it starts with the same question. When did my childhood go? Was it the time I realized that adults were not all they seemed to be? They talked of love and preached of love, but did not act so lovingly. Was that the day? So in this stanza, the poet again starts with the same question. When did my childhood go? That is, he inquires that when did his childhood go? When he was no more a child. Was it the time I realized, that is, he thinks that was it the time that he lost his childhood was when he realized that the adults, that the grown-ups were not what all they seemed to be. They talked of love. So what do the adults, according to him, he thought that the adults talked of love and preached of love. Preached means give advices that everyone should love one another, and people should be staying lovingly with one another. So he understands that the adults were not what all they seemed, because they talked of love, they preached of love. Preached means gave advices, gave sermons of love, but did not act so lovingly. They were not acting lovingly when they are grown-ups. Was it that realization, was it that day when he realized all these, that he lost his childhood? So in this stanza, what the students, you just see, I have given you again a little explanation. In this stanza, the poet thinks out that the adults around him did not practice what they actually preached. Now, giving a sermon is very easy, but when you act what you preach, then it becomes really very fruitful. So he realized that the adults around him did not practice what they usually preached. They taught others to be loving and caring, but their own behavior was different. So, was this the time when his childhood go? This is when the child started reasoning between good and bad. The first stanza, what does the poet convey? He says when he started realizing the distinction between reality and fantasy. Now here, when he started reasoning between good and bad, what is good and what is bad. Now the poet realizes that probably the getting reasonable about the world might have been the major step towards losing his childhood. Now the next stanza, that is the third stanza, again starts with the same question. When did my childhood go? Was it when I found my mind was really mine, to use whichever way I choose, producing thoughts that were not those of other people, but my own and mine alone? Was that the day? So how beautifully this is expressed, children. And this is really a true fact that the poet also writes here, that when did my childhood go? That is, when did his childhood go? Was it the time when he found that his mind was really his own? That is, he was in a stage when he could make his own decisions. His mind was really his own. He wasn't directed by any other person to act. He did his work according to his mind, according to his logical thinking. To use whichever way I choose, that is, whichever way he wanted his individuality, his individual self to act, he did that, producing thoughts that were not those of other people. So he says that was it that time when he lost his childhood, when he was producing his thoughts which were not of some other person. That is, he was not directed by some other person to act in his life, but it was my own and mine alone. So he thought that at that time he must have lost his childhood when he could think with his own mind and mine alone. Was that the day? So he's really wondering that was that the day when he lost his childhood? He was no more a child and he was a grown up. Children, how beautifully the poet has written this. So here in the third stanza, see the explanation. The poet, while growing up, what does he realize? He realizes that his mind is powerful and it takes his own decision. That is the maturity, when you start taking your own decision. You no more remain a child. His own opinions and thoughts have earned him individuality. His thoughts were his own and no one can affect them. One can say that a poem became aware that he can use his own thoughts, he can produce his own thoughts, and that he had free will. That is his free decision he could make. This was the time when the poet became aware of his own individuality and, of course, personality. He became an individual, his own self, his own thoughts he could practice. So he realizes that might be on such time when he acquired his individuality, his personality, he could act with his free will, he lost his childhood. This is when he thinks that his individuality and experience has taken away the childhood from him. Now the last stanza. Here, this is a very small one. Here you see what he writes. He starts. Now from the other three stanzas, the question starts, when did my childhood go? Now in this stanza, the fourth stanza, he says, where did my childhood go? Now he is intrigued to know that where actually it went away. Where did that beautiful childhood go away? It went to some forgotten place. So he says that his childhood must have gone to some unknown place, some forgotten place that's hidden in an infant's face. That's all I know. So the answer he gives in this stanza, that is his childhood go to some infant's face. It is to some forgotten place, and it is again encaptured in the face of an infant. Infant means a baby's face, and that's all he knows, that his childhood has gone when and where to. So here in this stanza you see the infant. In this last stanza of the poem, what does the childhood poem, the poet changes his question from what? From when to where. So what does he change? He changes his question from when to where. When to where. This you must remember. He has lost his childhood. The answer is very easy one, and the poet Marcus Nathan says that his childhood had gone hiding into some forgotten place, into some unknown place, forgotten place. And where it can be found? It can be found in an infant's face. And the last lines can be understood as that the childhood is a lost memory. We pass our childhood and it becomes memorable for us. It's a lost memory. We recall the fantasies and the moments associated with it, but at the same time, the innocence and the childhood are lost by every person. Isn't it? It's a beautiful poem, children, and this is very common among us. We all start growing up from childhood. You all have all grown up from childhood to teenagers. Now you all are all teenagers, and you realize that the childhood was an innocent phase of your life where you believed in reality and fantasy, where you did not have any mind of your own, when you had no free will, you had no decision of your own, and where your personality grew up, then you realize that you have lost your childhood. But of course, this also, every one of you must have realized that that innocence of the childhood is again found in the infant's face. So this is the poem. Now, students, now in this term, you will have subjective questions. So you must know the literary devices also of the poem. So here you see, first one is we have the rationalism involved in this poem. Rationalism means to think logically. The poet rationalizes the lost childhood when he was 11 and when he found out that hell and heaven don't exist, are not found in geography books. So this is the line. Was it the day I ceased to be 11? Was it the time I realized that hell and heaven could not be found in geography book? And what is the rhyme scheme? How is it rhyming? The poem, it is A, B, 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 C, C, D. A, B, B, C, C, D. It goes like this. C, C, D. All right. A. Now children, this rhyme scheme is only found in the first stanza. The others rhyme schemes are not same. Only in the first stanza it can be A, B, B, C, C, D. Now, second, you see individuality, how he grows his individuality. In stanza 3, the poet realized that he can use his own mind and can produce his own thoughts. He discovered the sense of his own personality, his own individuality in himself. And of course, there is the use of antithesis, hell and heaven. When two opposite words are used together in a sentence in a poem, then we call it as antithesis, hell and heaven, just the opposites. Now, inversion is also used here. Now, when inversion is that poetic device, when the subject verb order is reversed. Subject, now this is the subject, all right, this is the verb, this is the verb, all these are reversed. To use whichever way I choose. Now, it should be I choose whichever way to use. It should have been the normal sentence. But the poets use this kind of inversion to bring in more effect. So here what he has done, when the subject verb is order is reversed, then it is called an inversion. Now this technique, the refrain, alliteration. Now, of course, by now you all are thorough with the use of alliteration in all the poems. Now here in alliteration, you see it is the occurrence of the same sound at the beginning of closely connected words. Same sound means same consonant used at the beginning of the connected words. Hell and heaven is one example of alliteration. Was that the days another use of alliteration? Was it when I found my mind was really mine? Whichever way. All right. All these are, you see, was, w, all these are alliterations. My mind, alliteration. All right. Whichever way, alliteration. Next, you see the use of refrain. Now, what is the use of refrain? The repetition of the lines. You must have found the very first sentence of the poem is repeated in the first sentences of the 3 stanzas. That is, so what is a refrain? The repetition of the lines usually at the end or beginning of the poem is called a refrain. Refrains carries actually the central message of the poem. So this poem's central message is what? Where did my childhood go? So here the lines, when did my childhood go? Was that the day? Now you see these 2 sentences are repeated in each stanza, are examples of refrain. The first refrain is the central theme of the poem. As to when have the poet lost his childhood, while the second refrain ends with an exclamation which brings out the poet's realizations. Alright, when, it should be has. When has the poet lost his childhood, while the second refrain ends with an exclamation which brings out the poet's realization. Now, students, I hope you have understood the poem, the literary devices. If you have any doubt, please ask me in the in the comment box. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. Love you, students.